Hi everybody, how's it going? TryHackMe just released this new room. It's a walkthrough room about critical vulnerability in Cacti software. It's about unauthenticated and remote code execution. It got a CVE of 2022-46169. Cacti is basically a front-end framework that is used for data logging and industry standards that just basically provide solution in form of graphs for like monitoring and other features like configuration management frameworks and user polls. So let's just start. uh, I'm not gonna walk you through the reading part, you can do it yourself. We're just gonna solve the room. We're gonna log into SSH. You could have also used attack box attached to the machine to solve this room. And yeah, uh, sorry, let's just connect to the VPN first. Now let's SSH into the machine. Yes, and let's go. So it shows that SSH service is running on port 22 and vulnerable Cacti instance is running on port 80. We can just visit it. There will be nothing there because now we're gonna see about the logs. Password is TryHackMe and Kibana. Kibana is basically a SIEM software. Uh, you can monitor logs into it, and it just made all the process so easy. So it's running on port 5601. Let's access that. We'll be needing the layer, and let's start. So first task is about exploitation, and you see there were two vulnerabilities. One is unauthenticated access. It's an authentication bypass on the login page, and another one is remote code execution vulnerability. So let's look at authentication bypass. It just tells you about what endpoint basically remote code as authentication bypass is happening on. This is the endpoint, and there were mainly two functions. Um, Let me just find them. uh, yeah, in this get client address, they were using predetermined HTTP headers, and anyone can manipulate them using burp suite, like just intercept the request, and you can manipulate like header for like x forwarded for, and you could have entered like EC. Look at these screenshots. When there were when there is no X forwarded header, you see you're not authorized to this service. But as you add the header for X forwarded for and give it the IP address for localhost, the server will give the default response, and you will be able to bypass the admin login page. So this was that. So it's asking what is the HTTP header used to bypass authentication on this endpoint. It's X forwarded for. So yeah, next vulnerability is command injection. Uh, it was in it was mainly in this poll for data function that fetches the data from these two parameters, and in polar ID parameter you could have passed commands because it's fetching the data from SQL database. So if you passed any command, and it will be executed on the machine. So it basically gives us this request that you could have entered in burp suite intruder tab. Intruder is basically used to brute force host IDs and local data IDs. So you could have guessed like these IDs exist because they are only integer values. You could have read through this. I'm not gonna read it. You see here. So we're just gonna move to the exploitation part. What is the name of the hidden folder located in var www.html? So it shows us. Since we have already validated that there are valid host IDs and local data ID from the previous attack, we can automate the remote code execution. You could have also Googled about the CVE and Github. It already gave us the exploit, so we can just go ahead and download it here. I want to download it in Cactus. Yes. If you just look at the code here, what's it doing is it's we need to set here the IP for localhost so we can bypass authentication, and it's gonna and we need to pass arguments the for the IP, uh, the Cactus application proper endpoint, and our remote IP like attacker machine host and our port we're listening on, and it will just give us the bash reverse shell. So let's just look at it in the process. Let me just close these tabs. Okay, we can now move. So here is a script. If you just Python and use -h, you will see we need to specify a URL and a remote port and remote IP. Let's just start a network listener first for GG7, and we specify the URL using this. Okay, let me just copy the IP, and it's Cacti here because the software name is Cacti, and we specify our 10.0 IP of TryHackMe to get the reverse shell on, and port 1337. And if we just hit enter, you'll see here we'll get a reverse shell for the machine. You see it's currently brute forcing these login IDs uh, that we did here, this process, and whenever we are authorized, it will use this to remove to execute this bash reverse shell command on the system, and we'll get the reverse shell. We need to just wait for a bit. Okay, it's taking a while. Okay, so these are the answers we'll able to answer once we get the shell. Why is it taking so long? You see, we are able to bypass this login page. Okay, what's happening? Oh, we forgot to change the that why it wasn't executing successfully. We got to change the IP to localhost, as we see above. Now if we execute this, okay, we need to pass that in single quotes. Done. Now if we run this command, you'll see we'll get the reverse shell here, and you see we got local data IDs and host IDs, and we got a shell. Who am I? We are Apache user. Let's just stabilize a shell first. You could have used which Python 3 to first check if Python is available on the machine. If it isn't, you could have stabilized it using socat. So yeah, once that is stable, now we can work. So let's look at the first question. What is the name of hidden folder located in the var www.html directory? So this was the folder. Just hit enter, and our flag. Let's read into it, and it got flag.txt. Let's just paste it. Our next task is detecting and log analyzing and alerting about this vulnerability. So if we look from the above, IOCs are basically identifier indicators of compromise that your system is already compromised. Like if you see these requests in logs like remote agent.php, this was the endpoint we have unauthenticated, like we were bypassing the authentication mechanism using these parameters. we were brute forcing and executing a bash reverse shell command. So how do we detect that? You could move to this, and if you just move to the var log, usually there will be a path2 directory, but in CentOS type systems there is httpd. So let's just move into this directory, and there are logs. So you see there are access logs. If we just cat them, let's push the set our terminal to export term is equal to xterm. So yeah, if we just cat the access logs, you see all these requests we made to this endpoint to get a reverse shell executed in the base 64 encoded string. If you take the string and uh, run it on your machine and base 64-d, you see, did I half pasted it? You see echo this long base 64 string. Okay, there is some special character. Let's just copy this whole, and you see base 64-d code. Let's just paste it in cyberchef. You see, do this was the base 64 string, and now we can copy it, and if we paste this, you'll see we were executing this bash reverse shell command. That's why we got a reverse shell after bypassing the authentication on this endpoint. Okay, so we could have viewed logs for this, but how do we alert? Like, we don't always look for logs. Like, we keep on looking like every hour, every minute, if somebody has compromised the system or not. We gotta set up some automation. So there is a tool called suricata that we can add rules to. Like, if we just copy this, and there is a directory called cd etc suricata. I don't know if I'm spelling it correct. So there are rules, and we can just add our own rule, nano cacti exploit dot rules, right? And now let's just paste the alert rule that it tells us to, and save it. Control X Y enter, and let's just look at it. So yeah, it's saved. It's basically detecting it'll basically alert us like this: CVE-2022 Cacti exploit attempt, and it will look for like a get request on this endpoint and the URL with these poll data action and these parameters. Basically, that's how it's detecting the attack. Now we need to do one more thing. We need to specify this rule file in suricata configuration. Let's just hit Control W and search for rule file. You'll end up here, and press enter and specify it here: Cacti exploit.rules. That was the file we made. And we also gotta make one more change here. These are basically just telling us what to do right now, and next we're gonna solve these questions. But first, you see these this was the default directory for this, but we gotta change this because we have now etc suricata rules. Now save it and press enter, and now we gotta restart our service. Sudo systemctl restart suricata, and you'll see, let's just give up on our reverse shell, reset the terminal, start our listener again. It's a bit slow, so you gotta wait. And let's just answer this: what is the source IP of the adversary that successfully exploited the vulnerability last July 20? We're gonna look for the logs later. What is the base 64 decoded flag being submitted by the adversary? We're also gonna answer this later, but we can answer this question: what is the original value of default path rule? So we know it was var lib suricata rules that we changed to this, and service is restarted. So if we just view the file now, var log surikara and was.log. You just view this, and if now you will run this exploit on this machine, you'll see here it will alert us about like the rule we told you, web application attack from this IP to our own machine. You see, it's alerting us, right? So this was a thing that we did. So now let's look at the logs of July 20 log httpd, and let's just zoom it, and there are logs for, you see, 2023, let's just cat them, and you see there are a lot of them. Let me control C. If you check lines, sorry, there are 44,000 lines. So it also tells us to use grep to find these. What is the source IP of the adversary that successfully exploited the vulnerability last 20 July? So you could have done like access log and grep for an IP address. Basically, just we're gonna do ChatGPT. Okay, write me a grep pattern to grab IP addresses. You'll see it'll give you the grab pattern. Just copy it, and if you just paste this, you see we got some IP addresses, and most probably not the local host. We're gonna, you see, this is not gonna work. You see, this IP address was the answer. You could have tried it or viewed and read through logs and found it. So now big thing. Next thing is we gotta grab for a base64 encoded string, and it's a flag. So let's just grab for flag. You see, flag is equal to, this is a base64 string. Now we can decode it in our calling equal base64-d. This was a flag. Don't forget base64 decode. Yes sir. Let's move to task 5. So it's about now detection, security event, and information management. SIEM software like Kibana, it told us about. Let's just close them. So investigating events to Kibana, we move over to this URL, and if you just here, and you gotta move to discover, and it also gave us this pattern we can search for this to finding attacks related to the CVE. The logs that we just look at, you can find it here. So let's just in the search bar paste this and update, hit update. You see we got several hits. Okay, let's move further. So it explains what this pattern does. It's like basic grabbing for bash, sh, and PowerShell and command words in the like query or URL, and it's also grabbing this polar ID that was vulnerable to authentication by that was vulnerable to remote code execution, and this was the action. Okay, so we gotta search our query is this, and also we gotta set a time frame to July 19. So you hit show dates and you hit this and go to absolute. You can select from July 19 to not now, we need to July 20. July 20. Okay, update. Now we can go ahead and answer our questions. We gotta set some filters here. Let's just search for source IP, so we can, you see, it'll go ahead and search for source IPs. We gotta add URL path, URL query. Okay, and we can also add source address if we might. Yes. Okay, so let's look at it. Whereas our question, what field handle the value of remote agent.php in the elastic query string? So This is URL path, this is a query, and there is another thing, URL original. So yeah, here is our value for action and remote agent.php backend. So this is the field that's holding our value original. Okay, excluding the localhost IPs, what is the source IP of the adversary that exploited the vulnerability last July 20? So if you just look at the logs closer, excluding these IPs, you could have just hit minus on them, and this is the IPv6 localhost address, hit minus on them, and if you now look at the source addresses, there's only one IP remaining. Let's just copy and paste it. This was the IP of the adversary that attacked. Okay, excluding entries from the localhost IPs, what is the encoded base64 string used by the attacker during the exploitation attempts? Okay, we need to find a base64 string. What we can do here is, if we just look at, what do you say? How about just adding removing some filters here? We don't need a. Okay, we need source original. I see a base64 here, but I don't think that is. How about, hold up, URL path, we don't need that. We don't need source IP, the source address. You see, we see a long command for base64 string. Let's just look at what's a cyberchef, and if you just look at it closely, it's echoing this base64 string and this, and it asks us the same thing, excluding entries from the localhost IPs, and it's from the adversary IP, you see. So most probably this is it. Yes, they are executing the passive shell command. Let's just paste the base64 string and press enter, and that's the correct answer. Let's move to our last task. It's basically telling us how to mitigate this vulnerability and avoid further exploitation of these. So this is just telling you about how does an enterprise or an organization manage such serious vulnerabilities in their systems, and how the patch process goes on. And now we'll look at the vulnerable code mitigation. So as a response from Cacti developers to the vulnerability, a patch was immediately released in version 1.2.3. This was originally exploited in the version 1.2.2. So yeah, you can look at the GitHub commits that they have made. So first thing first, they and they were using this function to get the IP address of the authenticating user. Now they change down, they remove the n filter to only filter, and according to the source of Cacti, the documentation of these functions can be found here. You could have looked there. And secondly, they were using uh, some HTTP headers that can be manipulated by any user using burp suite or curl, anything, and they removed that too. Also, they were taking input of strings in polar ID parameter, so now they restricted that to only integers. So remote code execution is also fixed here. You see int filter, right? And they're also escaping shell arguments to stop the remote code execution from executing. And this was a function, they removed these HTTP headers and only used some like remote address variable that is used by default. So okay, let's just answer the questions. You could have read this. It's pretty interesting stuff. You gotta know the both sides, like how attackers exploit this vulnerability, and how the company or the developers fix this. You know. Okay, we got this. So based on the patch, what is the function used to restrict the input on polar ID? So we know it was the function get filter. This was the function they were using to restrict the polar ID parameter to integers only. And next question is, based on the patch, what is the function used to sanitize strings? To sanitize strings, they escape the shell argument. You see, Cacti escape shell arguments. Okay, based on the patch, what is the function that was modified to prevent authentication bypass? Get client address. they were using HTTP headers to identify the client address. Anyone could have manipulated that and added like localhost, and they will just bypass authentication using that. But now it's not possible, so they use this. Specifically, they use remote address to maintain the application functionality. Applied fix allows administrator to configure what HTTP proxy headers are acknowledged when determining the client IP. Okay, this was the previous code, and this is the patched code. You could have looked in Git commits. So this was a room. I really enjoyed it, and yeah, this was the video, and I'll see you in next one. Hope you learned something new. Leave a comment if you like the video, and see ya. Take care.